Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today, we are going to be doing a deep dive into the political landscape of Panama, a country that I think is the most confounding country in Latin America, and also where I lived for quite some time. And to do that, we are joined by Congressman José Pérez Barboni from Circuit 83, which happens to be the same circuit that I lived in when in Panama. Jose, at 25 years old, is one of the youngest congressmen in Panama, and we will discuss why he decided to get into politics at such a young age and also some of his main priorities in Congress. It's a very fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's go.
I'm going to be very direct. The problem and the controversy with this budget is that they were giving more money to the ministry's organizations and for paying salaries than giving more money to investment. So where is the real opportunity for the Panamanian to get a job? When you invest money in new industries, when you invest money in constructions, when you invest money in education, in health. But the problem is that they were just cutting on investment and they were keeping the same amount for functioning, for payrolls, for paying salaries. And when people noticed that, they went crazy because they said, it is not possible that you, as a new government, come to power, you say that you're going to lower the size of the state, but then to keep the same amount of money, that is going to keep paying the same amount of salaries. So technically, it was a way to notice that the government don't want to lower the size of the state, but they want to just replace the people who is in the state with the ones who got in power.
Hi, Jose. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation.
No, thank you, Rashid. I'm very glad to be part of this opportunity. I think it's always good to share our views and thoughts on what I believe it's young people in politics and how we can also shape so many things around our atmospheres and environments here in Panama that needs a lot of that young energy that I think we can provide from these opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. One of the most common things I say very often to my friends and to different audiences is you need to have more young people going into government to have a real change within government. It's not enough to just stand outside and argue for different policy changes. And Panama is surprisingly very good at this, at least recently, where is a very high proportion of the Congress that is young, like under 35, under 30 even. And that is pretty remarkable. So, could you tell us why you decided, at 25 years old, to join National Assembly in Panama?
Well, I used to be more interested in aviation. Actually, that was the career I was pursuing before getting into politics. But since I was very young, I got involved also in debate competitions like Model United Nations and many other activities that prepare people to be a better public speaker, to give better criteria for you to analyze complex situations in your country's economy, your country's politics aspects, and so many other issues, education, health. And I feel that since I was exposed to that opportunity of being part of a debate club, I was involved in the board of my debate club as well. I had the chance to be the president for 1 year before graduating. I feel that little experience shaped my political bone. Even though I didn't realize I was looking for it, it was right there. It was in my organism, in my system. And I started working also in embassies. I first worked in the British embassy here in Panama City, and after that, the Qatari embassy. And being close to government and working closer to government made me realize that we had a lot of things to change and to also pursue as opportunities for Panama. And I noticed that even though I was in a good organization like a British embassy or a Qatari embassy, if I was not the decision maker, I wouldn't be able to actually achieve in these diplomatic missions I noticed the importance of government and the relations I wanted to keep in order to achieve some stuff, especially for economic and commercial purposes. Back in the British Embassy, I used to work for the economic section, and for the Qatari Embassy, I used to work for the commercial one. So both experiences made me realize that I wanted to change a lot of stuff in my country, in Panama, but I was not a decision maker. I was just connection and a bridge for a foreign government to Panama. But at the end of the day, Panama is the one that takes a decision that sometimes doesn't really achieve what you're looking for. So I always had that little, let's say, grudge in my system, right? I was trying to figure out what I could do to change things. But I then started pursuing my aviation career. Since I started pursuing my aviation career, I thought that I was going to be a pilot, as I was always looking for an experience. But then I had this involvement in a political party that I wrote when I was 18 years old, that it's called Otro Camino. And during that presidential campaign back in 2019, I supported the presidential candidate whose name is Ricardo Lombana. He was the runner-up for this presidential election in 2024. And I supported him in 2019 when he got the third place. I supported him when he got the second place, now in 2024. And I will keep supporting him if he wants to run again, because I think he's a great leader who has not had the chance to be the president of the country. But definitely, I think that my involvement in debate, in the diplomatic missions, and then in the party made me take the decision to step forward and seek a seat in Congress, which is crazy because, just to conclude, I decided to run in November 2023, maybe 2 days before they closed the elections list, because they wanted you to submit documents and other relevant things that you had to before enrolling for the campaign. And I did it 2 days before, but thanks to the effort and to a great team that I had surrounding me, I think that I was able to get the result that made me get to Congress in the 1st of July of 2024.
What was the thing that really pushed you to join the list just 2 days before it closed?
Well, in Panama, we had a situation. I don't know if you remember. It was with the mining company called First Quantum. Yeah, it had a big protest. We had a crazy civil unrest situation going on. It lasted almost a month, if I recall. And it was from October to November 2023. And I was in Argentina when that was happening. I was very aware and I was paying close attention. But that was very weird, because even though I was pursuing my professional path that was aviation, I really wanted to come back to Panama to be part of that historic moment that was the Panamanian people fighting for economic and climate rights, because we didn't want the mine for many reasons. First of all, they were not giving us a fair contract. Secondly, they were not respecting climate and the environment and so many things that the Panamanians are very forceful about. So when that happened, I remember I had a call with Ricardo, who is the president of my political party. And he said, hey, you know what? I think people want young leaders. They want new, fresh minds to take over those positions in government, in the Congress. And I said, you know what? That's right. I'll take the step. I remember that he called me on a Saturday. And then on Monday, I was on a flight back to Panama. And my parents were like super mad at me because they didn't want me to, just enroll politics, first of all. And second, they thought it was very irresponsible for me to leave the career when I was about to finish. But actually, the truth is that even though I landed in Panama on Monday, on Wednesday, I was enrolling my candidacy to the Tribunal Electoral, that is our main authority for us to compete, to be candidates. And on Friday or Saturday, I was on a plane back to Argentina. And then I finished my career and I launched my campaign from Argentina. I recorded the videos from there. I started building a team from there. And it was a bit weird, again, because you are not in Panama and you are running for Congress. But I was very aware that I was never that close to Panama since the moment I decided to enroll. And it made me feel very close to, even though I was in Argentina, to be in touch with so many people, like building a team, recording my videos, launching my campaign. It was just a different way to make politics. And I think that we need to give credit to technology and to the new tools that we have in this era, because I feel that you were not able to do that maybe 15 or 20 years ago. Now with social media, even though time is crucial, now you can do it because we have Instagram, Twitter, X, TikTok and so many ways to reach people without actually knocking on their door and telling them, like, hey, I'm running for Congress.
So around that same time, in Argentina, there is a big election happening, the one with Milei, and that was a very big, contentious election cycle. And you were trying to campaign in Panama while being mixed up in the election cycle in Argentina. So I'm curious, how was that experience for you?
Well, I think this is going to open the door for me to show you one of the most amazing and weird moments I had in Argentina when it comes to elections, because I was flying actually from Cordoba, where I was studying, to Rosario. And I remember that I decided to go out in Rosario because I landed there and I was like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to get to know the city. I was able to stay there for a night. And suddenly when I'm leaving the airport, this was maybe, let me see the date. I don't know, it was November. It was 14th of November, actually, I think. And look who I met. I crossed paths with him at the airport.
Right.
And I was just hopping off the plane. And he was leaving Rosario because that day was his campaign closing. And I saw all this convoy of cars getting to the airport. And I was like, oh my God, this is messy. It has to be messy because in a few days, they had a match with Uruguay. And of course, Rosario is his hometown. And then suddenly you get Javier Milei coming down from the vehicle. And the atmosphere was crazy. And let me tell you something. In Cordoba, where I was studying, they were supporting a candidate that it was not Massa nor Milei. They were supporting Schiaretti. He used to be the governor of the province of Cordoba. And a lot of people went to the polls and voted for him. But of course, right after he lost and we got the second opportunity for the two top candidates to compete again, they were all shifting to Milei. And why was that? Because I feel that people were tired of Kirchnerism. They were tired of the figure of Christina Kirchner. And even though Milei represents something that I'm gonna make a very bold comparison, that maybe he represents what Trump represents in the U.S. He's radical. He has very strong views, and he is a very strong opposition to the left and all these ideas. He represented a change. People, sometimes they don't vote for the figure, but they vote for a change. And that's exactly what sometimes happens here in Panama, but mainly happens in polarized countries like Argentina or the US. And yeah, Argentina basically shifted all his support to the change rather to keep the same status quo, even though the first opportunity gave the first place to Massa and then Milei second. I've been always thinking that the second opportunities, or the second laps, as we call them here in Panama, they beneficiate the second candidate because that's the one who is able to get all the support from the parties that are behind him. So I'm a strong supporter of the second lap, by the way, here in Panama. I would love to get that as a constitutional change eventually, if we get the opportunity to be part of that reform. But Argentina was a very interesting case because I was in a place where neither Massa or Milei were the favorites, but it was an outsider. The person who got the fourth or fifth place is Schiaretti. And I was always paying attention because I feel that was going to be a very historical election, and indeed it was, as we were able to see.
So, it's funny what you say about second round voting, because if Panama had second round voting, it's very likely that Lombana would have won the election this year.
It is very likely. And I remember I went to a congress of the Republican Institute International, and they gave us a lecture about the second round, as you said. And the person who came, she was a doctor from the University of Notre Dame in Indiana. And she said, the second round of votes doesn't beneficiate the first person or the second one. It beneficiates the third person, because that's the one who gets the chance to decide who is going to win. Because it's the largest force after the two that are competing. And that made me think, well, that's kind of true. So let's say that Martín Torrijos, who was our candidate who got the third place, decided to support Muino, who is our president now. Maybe that theory would have been true, and it would have also crushed the theory that always the second place gets the victory on the next one. Right. It's always about negotiations. I think politics, it's always about alliances and like getting your close allies next to your objectives. But definitely, I feel that Lombana had a great chance to be the next president if we had a second round. And I'm not supporting it because of him, but Since 2019, when we had Nito Cortizo proclaimed as president in Panama, he won by a margin of 1.2 or 1.3 compared to Romulo Brooks. He was the other runner-up. And I felt that if we had a second opportunity, maybe Romulo would have been the president, as we were assuming with Lombana. But at the same time, I think that it's not guaranteed. It's always about the alliances and the negotiations that you make. And when I say alliances and negotiations, it doesn't need to be corrupt, because in Panama, we have this theory that when you say alliances or negotiations, it has to be under the table and in a very corrupt way. But I feel that if we reshape the idea of what an alliance and a strategy is, maybe the Panamanian people would understand that it is necessary to keep good politicians in the political positions. But yeah, I have a strong feeling about the second round, because since 2019, we've been seeing presidents winning with 33%, 34%. And I feel that doesn't really represent what the people here are going to want. You have 2/3 of the population tell you that they don't want that person, but you still have him in power. So it's better to give more credibility if we at least guaranteed a 50% in the first round. And then if that person doesn't reach the 50%, then it goes to the second round. And in the second round, then you have a more legitimate president, because he went through two electoral processes that guaranteed him the victory.
Yeah, Panama's way of doing elections for the president is very curious, just to put it mildly, because you have 7, 5, 8 people running for president at the same time, and it's not a big country, so it's not a big population. So you have less than 4 million people voting, and you have a pretty wide list of presidential candidates. So the president in Panama wins by such a razor thin margin. You would think, okay, maybe he gets it 47% of the vote, but no. A president in Panama could win with 37%, 29% of the vote even, which is quite a strange thing.
And then just think about this. We are 3 million people. Our population is around 4.4 million people. But let's pretend that many of those are young people that have not reached the electoral age. But it's always around 3 million people who get to vote. And you can win by having just 1 million on your side. So the truth is, and this is something that I didn't mention before, is that a lot of that percentage from those 3 million people that are allowed to vote, they don't really have a very large age. They are young people. They are first voters. They are second voters. They really can shape what happens in the country if we stick together as youth. But of course, we have divisions. One of the main reasons, and maybe you know this, is that they have too many political parties for a small country. Right now, we have 9 political parties. Well, we have 8 because one got disqualified since he didn't get enough votes. But 8 political parties for 3 million voters, I think that's too much. It really divides the vote. Maybe we need to raise the bar to become a party. Maybe we need to be a little bit more specific on the requisites to join a party. But at the same time, we don't want to create a situation where we are limiting democracy, right? Democracy is about having all the points of views that we can allow. It's having all the accessibility for people to enroll a political movement. But at the same time, I think that we need to be very aware of what we are doing. And if we really want to keep creating parties just for financial purposes, or if we really want to keep dividing the vote in the country. Look at the U.S. The U.S. Has a 2 political party system in many ways. Of course, they still have a few parties floating around, but the ones that really impact on the elections, it's either the Republican Party or the Democratic one. So I'm not saying that's the best case scenario for us to replicate, but it's a scenario for us to think.
There is another feature of Panama's electoral landscape that I find quite interesting. There is a very high number of independent candidates in National Assembly or Congress, and quite a few of them are young people. So I'm curious, why do you think that in Panama, independent candidates actually do so well?
That's a great question. And as you said, for example, I went to Guatemala And in Guatemala, you don't get too many independent candidates because I think the system doesn't really allow you to be independent. In the US, we've seen cases, right? We've seen many independent candidates that, yeah, they make some noise, but they really have a chance. They do not. For example, going back to Ricardo Lombana in 2019, he ran as independent and he got the third place. And then you also got a few congresswomen who made their way to Congress by being independent. I remember Ana Matilde Gomez. She used to be from my electoral zone. And you also had Yanibel Abrego, who used to be from the countryside, but sadly she got bought by a party and then she didn't want to be independent anymore. But the truth is that people here in Panama, they correlate being independent with being honest, which is not necessarily true. But it's the image that independent candidates have built during these years and during this campaign. They were able to demonstrate that if you're running independent, you don't have any political party, you don't have any godfather, you don't have any agenda that will promote the same corruption that we have been promoting in the different political spaces around Panama's government throughout the years. But the truth is, as I said, that being independent is not a guarantee that you're going to be good, that you're going to be efficient, that you're going to be honest. I feel that the ones that are in Congress right now are really good. They're my friends. And I feel that, yeah, they will demonstrate that they're honest and they're efficient. But we've seen in other positions, in other opportunities, actually in the last government, in the last 5 years that we had, 2019, 2024, you had an independent congressman called Adam Bejerano. Ironically, this used to be his office. Now I am using his office. The thing is that he came to the parliament as independent, but throughout the 5 years, he started shifting his policies and his support to the official party ideas and objectives while you were supposed to be opposition. So again, being independent, even though it's well looked now here in Panama, it's not a guarantee that it's going to be good. But the people outside, they relate being independent with being good. I feel that's why so many people go through the stress of getting signatures, because you need to get a lot of signatures in order to achieve your candidacy. For example, my political party, this is the first time we run as a political party. Last time it was Ricardo being independent and he was supporting some independent candidates. This time he realized that if you want to go into the system and change the system, you have to join the system in the same way they have in the past to get access to power and to the positions to make the changes in the country. So that's why we decided to become a party in Otro Camino. And even though a lot of people see us as independents, because technically we are by criteria, by our ideas, by the way we clash and challenge the status quo from the government, we are a political party that is trying to demonstrate that we can make a difference in the political system.
So let's talk about Otro Camino a bit, otherwise known as MOCA. And generally speaking, the core ideas of MOCA is the idea of anti-corruption, transparency, and other things along those lines. Now, Panama is a very confounding country in the sense that Panama, depending on precisely how you measure it, has the same or slightly more, so the highest GDP per capita in all of Latin America. The only thing close to be Chile. Uruguay is a bit under. But at the same time, Panama ranks about 101 relative to Chile at 27 in terms of the corruption and transparency index. So Chile has a very high wealth, but also very good transparency. Panama has terrible ranking on transparency, but a very high wealth, which is, again, not a common thing to occur at the same time. So that's why Panama is very confounding in this sense. And I think because of that, people rightly grasp that the system is very corrupt. And that's why it's very possible for a party like MOCA, Otro Camino, to say, hey, our big thing is anti-corruption. And it got quite a lot of attention in the public. So, you are part of MOCA. Why do you think MOCA, beyond what I said, was able to get so much traction in the last election?
Rushdie, it's crazy that when you look for Otro Camino in Google and you look for the ideology, it says anti-corruption party. Like, isn't that supposed to be obvious? Like, isn't it supposed to be obvious that parties are not corrupt? But in Panama, you have to basically shape this product as, hey, look, we're gonna challenge those statistics, as you mentioned. That, for example, Panama has one of the most, let's say, or the less transparent congresses around the world, because I can talk about the parliament where I am. And as you said, the central government is well known for not being as transparent as it should be. We had a few scandals in the past, like the Panama Papers, that Panama is a paraíso fiscal, as we say in Spanish, that we allowed too many transactions and operations that are not necessarily legal in other states. But the reality is that Panama is very confusing in that sense of ideology, because ideologies are supposed to be either your right, your left, your center. What is your idea of a government, of human rights, of many other topics that always pollute around the behavior of the people here in the country. But we had to shape it as an anti-corruption party, because we have a very strong ethics committee, and that ethics committee starts to filter who are those candidates who will represent the party. And when you get to the position, as it happens to me, to Grace and Ernesto, because we are 3 congressmen out of 71 that the Congress has here in Panama, we receive all the courses, all the trainings, all the sessions with different people who were able to give us the tools to, first of all, not commit influence traffic, to not commit any corruption behaviors, either by knowing that you were doing them or not knowing that you were doing them. It doesn't really makes you not guilty if you are not well prepared. So I feel that MOCA really offers the candidates and the people outside the opportunity to be shaped as someone who will not only not be corrupt, but someone who will also fight corruption. That's why our ideology is written as that in Google. But if you ask me, I think that MOCA is a center-right movement. It really embodies what a center-right movement internationally will embodies. But I'm not going to lie about the fact that we also have a lot of people who will claim to be center-left, for example. So that's why if you look for the body in Google as well, or in many other platforms, it's going to say that you receive people from all the spectrums and all the ideologies, which I think is very healthy in a political movement, because it gives you the opportunity to analyze situations from different perspectives and not being based on something that you share with most of the people. You have a clash, you have a debate. And that's why MOCA is very well known for being a different political party. They call the other parties traditional parties, but MOCA, they call it an hybrid. And that's why we're, I would say, in that gray zone, that we're not independents, but we are not the traditional parties. We're right in between, trying to merge people from traditional parties who want to make a change to a new movement, but we also try to get independents who don't have the chance to clash with the system that is so difficult for independents, and we would love to embody them, for them to run for a position, especially when they're prepared and they can give so much to their communities. So I would say that that's a pretty good wrap up about MOCA and what we do, and why our ideology tries to lower those statistics that you were mentioning at the beginning. We don't love to be in those statistics. We don't love to be in the list from the European Union. We don't love to be in the list from the OECD, the Netherlands. We will keep reshaping politics in Panama and our international image as well.
On the point of corruption and transparency, there was the, of course, infamous mining fiasco that we mentioned earlier, and I think it's useful for us to actually dive into it. So, around this time, when the protests were occurring because of the mining fiasco, it got really bad. I remember quite clearly there were days where the supermarket shelves were empty, almost like a movie from Soviet Russia. And people in Cherokee couldn't get gas, for example. It was pretty bad. The country went on a standstill. There were times when the Cinta Costera, you couldn't go anywhere. There were times when the passage to the airport, you had to get out the car and walk with your suitcase because it was completely blocked off. It was a real standstill for the country for almost a month. And internationally, I think people do not get really are fundamentally why the country was up in arms protesting for so long. The basic assumption that most people have, especially when I talk to people in Washington about this issue, is it was simply a climate, the protect the environment type protest. And I realized, yeah, people really have no idea deeply the complex reasons why people are protesting. So let's discuss this. Why did the country almost go up in flames for a month because of a mining contract?
So there were two type of protesters. There were two type of claims in this situation that we had here in Panama. The first one, as you said, was a climate component. It was the protect the environment. We are not going to allow another Panama Canal zone in our country. People were very patriotic about claiming that they didn't want to allow a different or a similar situation as the one that we had with the Panama Canal. Because people here in Panama, they hold great grudges sometimes about what happened with the enclave. They always say, oh yeah, we don't want to allow another Canadian zone or American zone. The problem is that they were also restricting the access to that zone in the mining area that was called Donoso and also in Cocle. So the people were fighting for the climate component, that it was being very damaging for the environment. And also they didn't want the repetition or the similarity to what we were having with the Panama Canal zone only a few years ago, 1999, when we got our independence like fully for the Panama Canal. And the second type of protesters that you had were the people who were claiming that they were not giving us enough money, because I think that the contract by year was giving us around $300 million or a little bit more. But when you were comparing those numbers with countries like Australia, Chile, Argentina, Zimbabwe, countries in Africa, in Oceania, in South America, we were not getting a good profit out of that contract. So you had two types of people, the ones who were fighting for the economic benefit, that were saying that the mining company was not giving us enough. And then you also had the ones who were claiming that the damage for environment was too high. When you combine those two factors, you get a lot of people in the streets saying, we're not going to allow another canal zone that doesn't pay enough and destroys the environment. And that was the perfect, let's say, a recipe for the people to decide to go out. And it started with a few. It started with maybe 100, 200. And then you had a few situations with a photographer. I don't know if you remember. We had a photographer called Audrey Baxter. He got a very bad injury in his eye. And I believe that from that specific moment, a lot of people also decided to go out to the street to claim justice for all the people who were protesting and were being assaulted, or there was a lot of police violence, a lot of repression, and the police didn't behave the best way. That was also a trigger for people to decide to go out and challenge the police, because even though you need to maintain order, because that's essential in every society, you need to have a public force that is able to protect its citizens and its goods. You also need to do it in a way that respects the integrity of that person. And I feel that so many components were you're just climbing on top of each other. The main reasons that I gave you, the situation with the photographer who got injured, and the police being extremely abusive. So it was just so many things that really made the country go as wild as you guys were seeing outside in the international networks and in so many elements. But the main and the most important thing that I haven't told you is that not necessarily was because of the mine. The government that we had, the PRD government, that is at the party that was governing last 5 years, they committed so many corruption cases throughout the 5 years. Through the pandemic, they basically wanted to buy some ventilators for people to breathe better with 10 times the cost that it used to be on the market. The IFARUM, that is an institution that provides scholarships and credits for students and loans for them to study, they were basically giving the scholarships to people who were close to government and they were wealthy. So many scandals was, getting in that mountain of a corruption that the last government decided to execute, that the mining company and the protest was the perfect cherry on top for everything to collapse. even though it had legitimate reasons, as I explained to you,
Right.
the reality behind the chaos that you saw, that was people being tired of a government abusing them for 5 years. I applied for a scholarship when I was 18 years old or 17. And what happened? They said, no, there's no scholarship available for aviation or for you to become a pilot. But why is that? They realized it was because they were giving those scholarships to people that were wealthy enough or close enough to government
Right.
to get that scholarship. There was no such thing as merit. So many different causes made people go out and fight to not allow corruption in the country. But the mining company was the perfect cherry on top for people to just decide, I'm going to go out to the street and I'm going to fight like hell. Yeah.
Another big issue in Panama that I know you have some involvement with directly is the Tapón del Darien Gap, which I think, according to Panama's data itself for 2023, about 500,000 people crossing through Panama via Darien, coming up through Colombia, going through Panama, going to Costa Rica, and of course hoping to make it to the US. And Panama's been trying to essentially help with medical provisions, try to get people out of Panama and, continue on their way. And this obviously causes a substantial strain on Panama's resources. And I'm curious what the National Assembly has prioritized or will prioritize for trying to deal with the problem in Darien. Is it more negotiation with the US? Is it some more UN involvement? Because it doesn't seem, especially because of the worsening in the situation in Venezuela, that it's not going to slow down.
Yeah, Rashid, that's a great question. And as you said, I had the chance to visit the Lajas Blancas Reception Center for Migrants. That's right next to Colombia in the province of Darien, well known for the Darien Gap, as you mentioned. And I am a commissioner of the government commission that treats migration, public security, narcotics strategies, and so many other related topics that have to do with government and the policies. So we were invited by the Ministry of Security to visit the Darien Gap. It was a one-day journey. We had to take a plane from Panama City to Meteti, that is in Darien. And then from Meteti, we were transported by bus to the Lajas Blancas Center. So while we were there, we got an explanation from the Ministry of Security. His name is Minister Frank Abrego. And he's the one leading the operation right now with the Senafront, that is the Servicio Nacional de Fronteras, like the Border Patrol in the US, if we have to compare it. So the thing here is that in Darien right now, you get so many nationalities crossing the Darien Gap. Of course, it starts with Venezuelans and Ecuadorians that are the main nationalities that we have right now crossing the Darien Gap. But you also get, and even though it sounds crazy, you get people from Afghanistan, you get people from Nepal, from India, from China, from Africa, and so many places that you get like, oh my God, why is it a better idea to come from those far places to Panama and try to cross the Darien Gap, which is a very long and chaotic experience for every single migrant that tries to do it. You had the chance to talk to the migrants. And for example, I met this nurse from Venezuela, and she was telling me that a few hours ago, before hopping into the boat that was taking her 4 hours up in the river to the Lajas Blancas Center, she got her money and all her clothes and so many things that she was bringing from Venezuela. And she was bringing around $5,000 because that's the minimum that a migrant pays from, let's say, a South American country up to the US when they get to the border. And now imagine if you come from further, if you come from China, from Nepal, from India, that's going to be a $10,000 experience or expedition. And for the Panamanian government, the cost is $100 million. We are paying that sum to provide for shelter, to provide for food, to provide for transport, to provide for security in the border area. Right now, the route that is very famous from Colombia to Panama is that they start in Acandí, that is in the Atlantic side. Then they go to Necoclí, that is also in the Atlantic side. And from that, they start the cross throughout the jungle that is one of the most dangerous one, because as I met this girl from Venezuela who got around $5,000 stolen, you also get people that get raped. You also get people that get killed. You get people that get diseases, and they also die from trying to cross the rivers. They also drown
Right.
in the trying of doing that. So it's very difficult for you to be there and to listen to all those stories, because you know that they are true because they come from the migrants. It's not the Ministry of Security telling you a statistic. Is the migrant itself telling you, I went through this. I lost my father, I lost my mother, I lost my kid. And you need to be very strong, because if you collapse, then you are not giving them hope, and then you are not behaving as the authority that you need to be. So what is the parliament doing now? That is one of the main questions that you ask. So for example, we're trying to be very energetic with what's going on in Venezuela, because Venezuela is the main nucleus that allows the crisis to keep getting worse. Because if Venezuela doesn't get any better, the Darien Gap is not going to get any better either, because people are trying to flee from a regime. So a few days ago, alongside with my fellow colleague Jorge Bloise, another congressman, and Roberto Zúñiga, we composed a resolution to tell the International Court to please proceed with the arrest of Nicolás Maduro. And even though this is only a letter and an action that stays in paper, we're also exploring mechanisms with our chancellor, with the Ministry of Foreign Relations, Javier Martinez Acha, to please try to get more information about the TIAR. It's called the TIAR in Spanish. It means Tratado Internacional. It basically allows the countries in the region of Latin America to actually do something in Venezuela, not only like diplomatic ways, but I feel that there's no way to get this guy out of power in Venezuela if someone doesn't enter and tries to take him out. Even though we are very aware that we need to respect the sovereignty of the country, when the person that is running the country is not the sovereign elected president, then I think you're giving the international community the right to explore extra-official ways to get you out of power and give the opportunity to the actual president, according to the many documents that he was able to share in social media and throughout the international media. So we're trying diplomatic ways. We're trying ways with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We're also talking to the Embassy of the U.S. I'm the president of the friendship group with the U.S., and I know that they have a very robust strategy about sending migrants with criminal records back to their countries. For example, they have been authorizing more than 10 flights per month to send Colombians, Venezuelans, and Ecuadorians with criminal records back to their countries so they can go to justice. And at the same time, they're also helping us because they're giving us these machines from Homeland Security where you can scan the face of the person, you can scan the ID, and that gives you a little bit more information about what the person is going through. And if they have criminal records, then they can process them and send them back in these repatriation flights that the U.S. is also helping. So as I am the president of that friendship group, I am being very close to the ambassador, Mari Carmen Aponte, here in Panama. I know that she's giving 130 million to Colombia to fight this situation, but I'm going to be very straightforward with you. Colombia is not doing anything here. Colombia is being very inactive in their fight to migration. Gustavo Petro is very disconnected from the situation. And I already told the ambassador that if she can give those 230 million to Panama for us to keep promoting repatriation flights and strengthening the security throughout the borders, it would be better used than in Colombia. So I'm trying to also make her see the light in Panama and not necessarily in Colombia, because if Colombia doesn't do anything, it's like throwing 230 million into a gap that doesn't really gonna be used for the purposes. But that's the general situation in Darien, and we're trying individually and as a parliament to do things in order to make things better for the migrants, and especially for us Panamanians to protect our borders as well.
How concrete of an issue is this still in Panama? Because I feel like I haven't seen as much reporting on this in Panama in the last few months, even though the issue hasn't really slowed down in terms of severity.
Yeah, that is a great question. I think in the past it was more relevant, but why was that? Because they were not having the system that we have now because back then people were saying that, for example, insecurity was a reason because we were not having a control on the migrants, that migrants were just crossing whenever they wanted, and they would be stealing, they would be around making crimes and stuff like that. But now the Ministry of Security, what they are doing is that they are getting buses, and every migrant needs to pay $60 to get in that bus, and that bus takes them from Lajas Blancas in Darien to Costa Rica, straightforward. They don't make any stopovers, they don't make any layovers. So that's why I feel that the perception of migrants being around is less, because now they have better conduct from Darien to Costa Rica. So it's a matter of efficiency. If you are efficiently fighting the problem, then the problem is getting lower in the priorities of the Panamanian. What is the main priority now of the Panamanian? For example, employment. We have a crisis now that people don't find any employment opportunities. What is the other aspect? Health. People feel that our security system doesn't really work better. And it's going to be a crazy discussion this year. Actually, in 1 week, we're going to be back in our sessions in Parliament discussing about what we're going to do with the security system and the pensions and everything. So, as I said, the efficiency of the ministry being able to conduct the migrants from one point, from point A to point B, without letting the migrants float around the country, is giving the perception that the Panamanian is not paying too much attention to that issue. And it's not related, the issue, with the main problems that I told you, public safety, unemployment, because they know that it's a matter internally we need to fix. But I feel that we can be way more efficient if we have more resources. And that's why I was telling you before, that if we make the US has a better strategy and that we can keep fighting illegal migrants, the perception of the problem is going to keep just getting lower, which I think is good. I think that is good that the perception of the problem is getting lower, even though internationally needs to be one of the main priorities, especially for the US, because they don't come to Panama, they want to get to the US. So that's why, even though it's not a national concern, it needs to be an international concern. I don't know if that makes sense.
Definitely, yeah.
It needs to be an international concern.
So let's talk about those larger questions that are more prominent in Panama now: the unemployment, cost of living, economic issues. And this can be centered on the recent budget approval. It's like, 2 days ago that the budget got approved, and it was a very contentious budget. I believe you were in National Assembly till past 3 in the morning, I think it was, right? Why was this year's budget so contentious that the vote took so long? And I figured that it would not be this case because people were very much looking forward to a more growth-centered policy from the government. What caused the controversy?
That is a great question. So people started to be very observant about it, because my theory was, hey, guys, let's plan this. For example, I suggested to close the women ministry, that I think is not efficient at all, and it doesn't really help women to have better days ahead, or they don't really have a lot of policies for them. And that ministry, for example, is $20 million per year. And then you also had a few directions and secretaries that are $9 million. So I was suggesting, hey, let's close here, let's close there, let's do this and that and that. But of course, the minister was like, no, we cannot do that in 5 minutes. What we really wanted was to shift some money from payrolls, from salaries, to investment. And the number was great. I think that $26,000 million for a country like Panama that has been historically increasing its budget was a really good move from the Minister Chapman, who is our Minister for Economic and Finance. But after that, I feel that so many internal pressures, especially from ministries or from universities, started twisting his arm to make him increase the budget. And that's what happened, because suddenly you had this really nice example of austerity, of not wasting money, $26,000 million, but then you have $30,000 million. And it was a big increase. I think it was 12% increase from 1 week to another. And then you start realizing that maybe it's because even though he wanted to do a good thing, he got so many hidden powers stuck into his ear and also twisting his arm that he was not able to fight back. And that's why we also had the document that suffered an increase of percent. But the worst case, again, the cherry on top, was that during the first debate, that is the best filter that you have, because it's the budget commission talking to the ministers, talking to the directors, talking to the administrators, and asking, why are we going to have this amount of money? Where are we going to have this amount of projects? Where are we going to have this and that? That was suspended. And then decided to just keep that part that was the most specific one, the most detailed one, and then decided to take the document without reading it to the second debate. And that's why we had the fight on Monday morning, where you had a few congressmen screaming to each other in the budget commission. That's why we had the crazy session that lasted 18 hours during the second debate. Right. And that's why it was so controversial when you were reading the news. That's not the process that we deserved. It was not the process that the parliament and the country deserved. They didn't respect the processes that we needed to respect. And that's why I feel that people felt so angry about this budget and about the way that the Ministry of Economic and Finance decided to lead the discussion.
Why was the first round of debate, more technical debate, suspended?
So the problem was that they suspended the most technical debate that we call in Spanish and here in the parliament, vistas presupuestarias. They were only able to conduct 10 out of 96 institutions. So that means that instead of, for example, asking the Minister of Education and the Minister of Security and the Minister of Health, well, they were able to actually interview the Minister of Health. But so many other important institutions that were having so many increases in their budget were not able to come to the technical debate in the first debate because 10 out of 15 commissioners decided to suspend the debate. And look, here's the most interesting thing. Who do you think were the 5 commissioners who were against advancing without doing this? From which current?
What's their argument for not wanting to go through the full first round debate? Why suspend it?
It was about time. But here's the thing. It's true. If we were to conduct the 96 interviews, we were not going to be able to finish by yesterday midnight. That technically is when we are allowed to discuss as a maximum, because it's the period for regular sessions, for ordinary sessions, as we call them. But you have other mechanisms. You can call extraordinary sessions, as the president is doing now for our pension system, for our social security. But I think that he didn't want to join both topics, or he didn't want to include them in the same session because both topics were going to be very controversial. So he gave the order to the budget commission and to those 10 congressmen who said yes to skip the interviews. But that's also a lack of transparency. And that's exactly the way that you give the excuse to Barclays or to Fitch Ratings or to many other financial agencies outside to say, Panama is not transparent, Panama is corrupt, Panama approves budgets without actually checking what they're approving. And again, it's taking care of our international image that we don't do. It's taking care of the image of the minister who comes from those agencies. Actually, the minister, I think he had a good experience with Fitch, with Barclays, with so many agencies around the world. And that's why I'm so impressed that he allowed that. But sometimes I think it's not only his fault, but definitely they had the excuse of time. The president didn't want to give extraordinary sessions for this topic. And at the same time, I feel that it's a matter of pride, I guess. And at the same time, they also had another option that was approving the budget on the 2nd of January of next year by executive cabinet of the president. But that was like the last resource that maybe they didn't want to do because we have no precedent about it, I think. We have no previous experience that allows the president to say, oh, I'm going to do this. So once again, I feel that it's a matter of not being organized, then trying to push everything regardless of if it's violating the right process or not. And listen to me, people started comparing this to the mining debate, to when the mining debate happened. It was something similar. In 3 days, we had 3 debates, and they were all just the same. They were not able to examine things technically, but they were just able to approve and approve and approve. And we wanted a better debate, but that didn't happen.
What do you think should be the kind of reform priorities that the National Assembly should pick up to accelerate growth in Panama? Things that you and by extension your party, Otro Camino, also really think should happen in Panama urgently.
Well, Rashid, one of the main things that I think will help Panama to get back on track when it comes to economic growth, it's taking advantage of our services and logistical hub, because Panama is right in the middle of everything. And I know that now, for example, the US Embassy and the Ministry of Commerce are trying to promote the semiconductors industry. And why I say semiconductors industry as a way to promote more employment here in Panama, that is one of the main issues. When you think about a semiconductor, it can be anywhere. It can be in a race car that you control remotely for kids, but it can also be in military equipment and in military technology. So if we make Panama the hub for distribution, as it is a desire, I think we're going to be able to actually respond to that economic issue that we have of not being able to give people employment. Because Panama has a lot of opportunities that we're not exploiting yet. For example, you have too many airports that are not used properly. We have airports in the Atlantic, we have airports in the center of the country, that if we start, for example, giving concessions for these airports, we can attract airlines that will also attract more employment opportunities. So Panama's future is based on logistics for tourism as a gambling center, because Panama doesn't have a lot of restrictions on gambling. And I've heard so many colleagues talking about, oh yeah, let's eliminate the tax for foreigners who come to Panama to gamble, because if we do that, we're going to be able to create a different way of tourism. We've been also listening to many CAF and Banco Mundial, World Bank initiatives that they want to promote agriculture, they want to promote tourism. So if we really put our efforts in the logistical sector and in tourism, I feel that we're not going to only help people to get a job, but we're also going to help people to stay in their hometowns. Because the problem now is that, in Panama, we have 4.4 million people, but 1.5 of those 4 million people are here in the city because they don't find opportunities in their countryside or in their hometowns unless they are the owners of, let's say, a parcel or like a farm or something that they inherited from their families. So it's a matter of promoting logistical and tourism hubs outside of Panama City and creating real opportunities for people out there. And I'm going to be very close to that initiative about the semiconductors, about tourism, about gambling, and so many things that might need to come through the parliament before being a reality. So it's a matter of making sure people out there see Panama as an opportunity to invest as well, the international community. But we need to get Panama out of those lists, the European Union list, the OECD list, so many lists that really limit Panama to get investors, because people are like in the city, in the street. Oh, but why does it affect Panama to be on a list? Like, how do I see the negative of that? I'm telling you, many companies won't come to Panama if they see Panama in the list. So we need to get Panama out of that list, and then they will come. So I am trying to help to fight against those things, and at the same time to be part of the solution for the efforts. And hopefully in a few years, in 5 years, if you get the chance to talk to me again, maybe I can give you some results, because we just finished our first 4 months of work. But I'm pretty sure that we have a good roadmap that if we execute it well, we're going to be able to get Panama better solutions for the different issues that we have.
Would you describe yourself as a libertarian?
Well, yeah, I would say that I'm center-right. I believe in free market. I believe that everyone has a right to a job, that everyone has a right to be an entrepreneur, and that it's a crazy world outside and we need to compete against each other. But I think that the government, instead of being the main employer of the people in our country, needs to be the way to facilitate job opportunities and investment opportunities for every single Panamanian who wants to be better and to grow. But yeah, I consider myself a libertarian in a way, in economic ways. And I feel that there's no system that is perfect. I'm not saying that capitalism is perfect, but I feel that it's one of the better systems to respect merit and to give people the chance to make great frog leaps to different levels.
Jose, thank you. This has been a delightful conversation.
It was, Rashid. Thank you very much. And I'm so sorry for the technical issues. Hopefully we can fix them here in Congress very soon. And thank you to all the people that is listening. Hopefully we can also achieve great stuff together. And I am reachable by Instagram, by my website, perezbarboni.com. So feel free to reach if you want more information about anything. Thank you very much again.
This has been a CPSI original podcast. Check out all of our proudly produced audio series and written works at cpsi.org. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletters at cpsi.media.